Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stukent Digital Summit for Supply Chain. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Paul Cotter. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for Higher Education here at Stukent, and I'm thrilled to be hosting this event with you today. As we begin, I want to encourage you to use the chat feature on your screen. Go ahead and start out by telling us where you're from, what school you're teaching at. Tell us which supply chain course you're teaching. We want to hear about it. Also, feel free to ask any questions at any time. Our amazing team is standing by to answer your questions, and if they don't get answered in the moment, don't worry, we'll have a live Q&A after every single session today, after every speaker, and we'll answer all of those questions. Right now, we're going to take some time. We're going to put the agenda up on the screen, and I just want to review that with you. So first, we're going to hear from Danica Porter. She's going to talk about exploring new opportunities and challenges, the impact of AI on supply chain management. Next, we'll have Dr. Rodolfo Santamaria. He is going to speak on the 21st century supply chain, a view of logistics, transportation, and distribution. And finally, we're going to end today with a panel discussion with Vicki Clark, Nathan Stempel, and Lisa Goolsby. And the panel discussion is titled Navigating Supply Chain Resilience in an Era of Uncertainty. Throughout today's event, we are going to give you the opportunity to win some prizes. Our first giveaway is for two $25 gift cards, and they'll be chosen from our most engaged attendees in the chat. So be sure and use the chat. We also are going to encourage you to hop onto your favorite form of social media and post what you're learning throughout today's event. When you do that, use the hashtag StukentDS23, and one lucky winner who posts using that hashtag will receive a $50 gift card. So I'm excited to kick things off. It's great to see you on here. Gary from Boca Raton, Florida, teaches supply chain and project management. Welcome, Gary. Therese is from Wisconsin. RG is at Lynn University. Brandon Savage from Kansas State University. Brandon also teaches supply chain operations and project management. So welcome, everyone. We're really glad to have you here with us. As we kick off, I want to just remind you that our mission here at Stukent is to help you, help your students, help the world. And right now, I am happy to introduce to you Stuart Draper. He is the founder and CEO here at Stukent, and he's going to share some thoughts with you.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you to all of you for taking time to be with us and join us here today. For 10 years now, Stukent has been on a mission, as Paul said, to help educators, help students, help the world. And we hope that it doesn't take very long for you to have that mission memorized as well, because we want you to be a part of the mission with us. It takes the educators for us to be able to fulfill our mission. I was a marketing major in college. I took the supply chain class, had to take the intro to supply chain class. And I remember feeling lost. I do remember, like, you know how in accounting, you remember, oh, it was debits and credits. So economics, that was supply and demand. Supply chain, that was like shipping stuff. That was the root beer game. I remember that, playing this game. What we've tried to do here at Stukent is build what we wish we had had when we were in college. The root beer game takes about an hour to go through. Our simulations that we're working on, we call them Simternships. They provide a semester-long learning experience for your students. And we pair those with up-to-date courseware. That some of the speakers here today are our authors here at Stukent that have worked on this supply chain content with us. And I'm so excited for you to hear from them. So I don't want to take much more of your time. We're trying to build a community. The purpose of this today isn't just to sell Stukent products. And I hope you don't feel that, but rather that you feel like you're getting great information that will help you in your careers as educators. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Stuart Draper, and I'll see you around.
Thanks, Stuart. Well, we have an incredible lineup today, and we want to get it started right now. So kicking off, we're going to have Danica Porter come on screen. Danica obtained her Master's of Engineering from MIT in Systems and Supply Chain. She's a partner at IOTA Consulting, a management consultant firm where she works in supply chain and project management, and also data analytics and heavy manufacturing and technology. She does a lot. Danica is the co-founder and the COO of Vita Nova Tech, a fertility company. Additionally, Danica is completing her PhD in cardiology at the Cummings School of Medicine, where she's using machine learning to help predict sudden cardiac death by rewriting the algorithms used to find certain markers. Danica is also the author of Stukent's Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations courseware, which was released last fall. Welcome, Danica.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You're a busy person.
Yeah, I listened to that, and it's a bit, I guess, overwhelming to hear all the stuff I do. But then I look at my day timer, I'm like, oh, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah. Well, before I turn the time over to Danica, I just want to let everyone on this webinar today know that just as a free gift for attending, we want to give each of you free instructor access to Danica's courseware, Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations. If you click on the link that's on your screen now, we'll give you free instructor access. With that instructor access, you'll be able to review the entire courseware that Danica wrote. You'll be able to see the lesson plans, the sample syllabus, the expert sessions, the quizzes, everything, and you'll be able to get a good feel of it and see if you feel like it's a right fit for your classroom. So I invite you to click on that link and do that. And Danica, I'm going to turn the time over to you. And when you're finished, I'll hop on and we'll do the Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. I will dive right in. Obviously, AI, machine learning, it's a big thing right now. It's a really big deal. It's, impacting everything, including supply chain. And it's like, how can we better use this to make more effective supply chains? How do we use it to our benefit? Because I'll go through some of the shortcomings that we have with AI if it's not employed properly. So quick agenda for today. We're just going to review AI and ML, just what they are specifically and how they work with each other. Then we'll go into the challenges of AI and ML, what it does, what they can do, the shortcomings, why do we use it, and where is it used? And then we'll finish up with opportunities. So these are case studies, real life ones that use AI and ML, and how it can actually benefit everyone, companies, the actual supply chain itself, and end results when it is employed and deployed properly. So like I said, quick review of artificial intelligence. So it's just that ability for a computer to perform tasks. You're telling it to do something and it's going to go through. I think people think that it's intuitive, and it's actually not. The computer and the algorithms that AI are based on require data and direction. So an example, everything you put into ChatGPT, it's included, and it's learning from what you put into it. So machine learning, well, it's just a subset of AI. It's these specific algorithms, and they learn through experience or new data sets. It works really well in a warehouse or in operations because it's constantly getting all of this data, and it can review and update itself, sort of without human interference. It can pull from a very connected warehouse. And so these algorithms can evolve as more and more and more data, right? It's just pattern recognition. And so the more data it gets, the more refined its patterns get. So machine learning is amazing because it's really useful for finding these sort of unknown patterns or relationships in data. Sales, like this sells really well with this, or these are the days that you should be ordering because the price seems to be the lowest, or when you order on a Tuesday, you actually get your product a day sooner for whatever reason. Right? It can pick up on all these nuanced things that the human eye can't see easily, right? It can very quickly pick it up. So it's a really effective tool to gain immense amount of insight or improve efficiency in these day-to-day operations. And this future forward view of, hey, you should do this, or you should sell these things together, or you should run these two these two products back to back. But like I said, with anything, we need to figure out and understand really what it is. So like I said, with machine learning, it's just that useful to gain insights and efficiency for finding these unknown patterns. And I have a lovely little photo here of all the code that some people can use. Of course, this is like a beautiful image. My code is typically white code on a black screen. I don't get this fun color stuff, but again, really important that we understand truly what machine learning is. I think everyone thinks it's like this lovely crystal ball and you can, oh, it'll tell you anything. It's like, well, it's actually only telling you a pattern based on the data that, it was fed. So some of the best and, nice highlights of it is that it can group data by finding these underlying relationships. Like I said, it works typically best on numerical data. While we have large language models now, they are still developing. I mean, I used to have examples where I would talk about letting machine learning write your Valentine's Day cards, and those are laughable examples because the language models still have a long way to come. They're getting there, but again, it just depends on all that different use of data, and someone on the back end has to say, this is like this or this is like this, but all the different languages and the slang that everyone uses, very arduous job. So they are getting better, but for the most part, in supply chain, we don't really need to use the large language models. We can rely on that numerical data. It also is a nice way because it provides a visualization of the relationships and their strengths. Products, there's some open AI and open market products, and you can pull out the visual. So it's not just code, and it's not just providing you a number saying, oh, this is the regression, or this is the strength that actually can show you visually on a graph. Obviously, super useful in any field as well. It's seen in medicine, it's seen in all types of different technologies. But there's a lot of issues, like I said. So you can see these are news clippings that I have pulled. So few companies have used AI, and then unfortunately it resulted in not a great outcome, right? So there was an AI recruiting tool, and it actually didn't hire a single female because that's what it had looked at, the data set of who had been hired, and then it just employed it. So understanding that the bias that you have in your data is then transferred and used in your AI and machine learning. Again, it's not particularly intuitive. It's not going to say, oh, this doesn't make sense. It's like, well, the previous data has said, therefore we're going to go forward. So lots and lots and lots of like shortcomings. Like I said, it's that garbage in, garbage out theory, and it really applies here. So the data that you are going to use, especially if you're using it in supply chain, really needs to be accurate. It needs to be clean and cleansed. And if someone inputs, dates in a different way, your machine learning is not necessarily going to understand that is the same way if you write it day, month, year, or month, day, year, or you actually type it out. Those are all seen as unique data points. Again, it's getting better, but that's a lot of work that has to go into it. So there's still a lot going on. And so on the end where you would like to use it, make sure that the data that you're inputting into a system is really standardized, because that will help get you to a better place. So again, using the right machine learning algorithms are also, part and parcel of getting an outcome that matches what is really needed or what is making sense for the company or the situation that you find yourself in. When I talk about machine learning and supply chain with my students, I constantly say, okay, you need to understand the data that you're using needs to be accurate. It needs to be clean, because otherwise you're going to end up with all kinds of weird and wonky things that say you need to order like this mass amount of, quantity, or you need to, be hiring all these people because your algorithm's saying, but it's like, oh, you pulled from, really high output, or, seasonally assisted data. It's around, the holidays. And of course, there's always higher demand and whatnot. So if you use that then in your dating, you say, oh yeah, you can just look at these past 3 months and it includes one of these heavy months. Your result is that you're going to be overhiring, overproducing. So again, it's really, really important to know what your data is going to say. So a little bit more diving into these shortcomings. It's not entirely predictive, right? Machine learning and any of the AI, it's using prior data, finding these relationships and making predictions. So it's really only as good as that data is provided. And supply chains are incredibly complex. That's why we really haven't seen a massive AI or ML structure for supply chain, because there are so many moving parts, right? We'll see AI in a certain aspect, oh, improve your sourcing, or oh, improve your transportation. But there's no wide sweeping thing because supply chains are so complex, right? There's so many different functions and they're all interwoven into each other. And another sort of downside of supply chain is that each department is almost incentivized to fight against or work against another department. Transportation, you must reduce your costs. Okay, great. Well, we're only going to do a few different, loads in and out. It's like, cool, now my inventory is going to go through the roof, and maybe that product will end up expiring, or we don't need as much, or we don't want to order as much. We don't have the physical space, but the transportation department's like, well, we have to cut costs, so we're just going to have less runs. And so they end up having this interdepartmental competition, which is a really bad thing for supply chain overall, for the efficiencies. It doesn't actually help anybody. We need that more holistic approach to looking at supply chain. There's no specific AI tool for that, but we can use AI in the departments, but talking to each other, the human element that goes behind all of that, to understand, okay, well, this is what is beneficial for my department, but what's beneficial to yours, and how is that going to impact each other. So obviously you have all these shortcomings. Why do we use it at all, right? Well, like I said before, it really quickly finds patterns in that data and how many service hours there are, or we can link things to weather. We can pull in all this other information to truly try and understand when something is needed, or when sales are really high, or when we need to do a preventative maintenance or refurb something, right? It can group this data by likeness that we don't even see, to the human eye might not see, or we might not relate pieces of data. That machine learning can do that for us. It gives us that, insight. It doesn't have those, tired eyes or whatnot. Obviously, it can provide insight into new products. Well, we know that this new product coming on is similar to a couple others, and it can take the data from those prior to and then give, a little bit of a predictive analysis saying, okay, these conditions, this is what the sales should be, therefore this is what you should be producing, this is potentially what the demand is, all these things. It gives that really cool insight into how something could perform. And then a fun thing also is that it helps you can use it to help forecast the number of supply chain students. Obviously, supply chain went from sort of, it was known and talked about in 2016, 17, 18, 19. It was kind of getting a little bit cooler. Then we had COVID and it erupted, right? Supply chain is everywhere. I don't think you could open a newspaper article on your phone or physical paper or go anywhere without hearing supply chain. It felt a bit like the Lady Gaga comment of, one day you're not going to be able to go to a coffee shop without hearing a song by me or my name. That was supply chain, right? It has just become such a big deal, and it's very obvious that people don't truly understand it. They think of supply chain as just procurement or just one part of it, but it's really important to understand that supply chain is a whole big thing. So we need a lot more people going into supply chain to then fulfill all these new roles that have just what seems like they've popped out of the snow like daisies, but they've always been there, and now they're just highlighted a bit more. So you can use machine learning to look at industry trends and the number of supply chain students that you could potentially be getting, how to increase, your program, hiring more professors, right? We can use machine learning, like I said, in every different industry, including how to help us move forward with supply chain. So some of the coolest places that AI and machine learning have been used is that they're in production. How much should I run? How long should the production run be? How much should I produce? When do I switch? Do I want longer runs? Do I want shorter runs? What about planning? What about warehousing? How big should the warehouse be? What should it have in it? Where should the warehouse be, right? All of this, these questions can, be given to AI or to machine learning specific algorithms to figure out what we should do with this, right? Where do we think that these sales are going to come from? Where should we open a new warehouse? What's the lifespan of this heavy duty piece of equipment that's, multiple millions of dollars? How long do we think it will last in these conditions, right? Some cases, the industry already has the data. In some cases, the company already has the data. It's like, well, we already have a shop in this part of the world, and this is how this functions. It doesn't do very well in dry climates. And these are the problems that it has when it's in super humid climates, right? Again, you can pull in all of that data. Of course, you have to be collecting the data in order to use the AI or any of the machine learning algorithms. Obviously, it helps with improving the planning of resources. How many people do you need, or what materials do you need, and when do you need them? Warehouse location selections. That famous line when you're on any type of online shopping. Ooh, you like this, or this is in your shopping cart. Other people who bought that are buying this. That's a very typical K nearest neighbors machine learning algorithm. It's looking at your characteristics as to what you've paused on and how long you've paused on this image and what you have then put into your cart and saying, oh, other people that put this into their cart also bought these, 6 different. You're like, how does this happen? Well, that's how, right? It's collecting all that data on the other end, and sometimes it helps promote sales. People will be like, oh, that is a cool, I do need toothpaste if I'm buying a toothbrush, or I'm buying dental floss, or orange juice or something else. So they're used kind of everywhere. So obviously, now that we've talked about the shortcomings, where we can use it, it's not a bad thing for us to dive right into some of the case studies. And these are things that I have done in my work experience. So just having a 34% decrease in redundant inventory. So there is safety stock, and then there's excess inventory. So that's one of those. An 85% decrease in well ruptured. So I worked with an oil and gas company, well, a company that collected all of the data on all of the fracking sites in a couple countries, and just trying to decrease well ruptures. Well, that was a perfect place. We have data collected every 2 seconds on all of these different wells, so it's pretty cool, and that's a great place for machine learning. Again, you have all this information. And then, of course, a significant reduction of emergency orders. Emergency orders are where it is an emergency. Your plant is shut down, or the operations have stopped because there's a missing part. There isn't something that is available that is needed. So common issues in inventory management. Obviously, finding that optimal amount of inventory to have a safety stock. We don't need excess inventory or a copious amount of redundant inventory. Obviously, we need some safety stock because you never know what's going to happen. Again, I think COVID, the Russia-Ukraine war has proved that, the Suez Canal, it's beneficial to have a little bit of safety stock, but you don't need so much that you have stock for 18 years. So machine learning can help you figure out those demand patterns. What should be ordered and what is being ordered and how often should it be ordered? It can look at the data over the past number of years, or depending on how long this company has been collecting it, decades, right? And then it can, figure out, okay, in this specific month or around these months or this, specific event, including, ice cream sales typically tied to like heat and hot weather. The hotter it is, probably the more ice cream sales you're going to have, or more flip-flop sales, or towels. It can tell you that, and it can sort of tell you the lead up. It can show you all these different patterns based on all that data that you've collected. Obviously, it can help with the procurement of when you should be ordering or looking for a new part. It can help, tell you what the actual supplier lead time is, because a lot of companies I've notice I go in and they don't have the lead times in their system. It's like, okay, well, we should be figuring that out. And then you can use the basic regression or any type of other machine learning algorithm to understand what the true supplier lead time is from the time that you place the order until the time it arrives on site. And then you can look at this type of item you have. It's perishable. Okay, so you have a very short shelf life. You need to get that out. It's consumable. It's going to be eaten or used, and it's not going to be put back on the shelf, right? Safety glasses at any sort of warehousing, manufacturing, construction site, right? You use them and you're not going to turn them in at the end of the day. You typically keep them, but then you'll probably end up with a few. You want to have safety glasses that you can actually see out of, that fit, all that stuff. So it can help with all of that and understand what your demand patterns need to be. So inventory management, I found, pairs really well with clustering. Clustering is a type of machine learning, such as k-nearest neighbors, or k-means clustering. You're just looking at all the attributes of these pieces, or these parts that you're looking for, or anything that you're selling. Particularly, doesn't necessarily need to be like a physical part. And you can look at the attributes of it. Okay, what is the cost? What is the shelf life on it? What do I need from that? And so we can use it for critical spares, obviously, right? Certain algorithms are fine, and they'll group these parts on these attributes of like, how often is this company ordering critical spare, or how often does this critical spare need to be reused? In ideal, like OEM, manufacturing statistics, it says this just should last 6 years. Well, it's not operating in a desert, right? When they tested this in the factory, here we are in a desert. We've got tons of sand that can build up, that can ruin the filters. How often do we really need to do this? So you can then create these specific clusters based on all of this data that you have hopefully collected. And you can create a replenishment plan for each of the cluster, because the cluster is going to pull together. It's going to look at all these different parts and all the different attributes, and then say, ooh, I've created sort of 5 or 6 different clusters, and they are aligned because they have a similar shelf life, or a similar ordering pattern, or a similar cost, or they actually typically are ordered together. If I'm replacing this one also gets replaced. So this is that demand pattern, and you just wouldn't have thought to pair some of these things together. And so it just can help you understand the patterns in your own data. And then obviously you can link these clusters, or you'll even end up with a cluster of the decommission or disposal schedule of, okay, we know that this takes 5 years. We're probably not going to order any more spares when we're at 4.5 years, because we know that we're going to decommission this, or we're moving to a new site, and this is not coming, this piece of equipment is not coming with us. So a specific example of that, copious amounts of excess inventory in the Department of Defense, the Department of National Defense, and the Ministry of Defense. So each of these massive defense units had significant excess inventory, like to the billions of excess inventory. And not only did they have excess inventory, they didn't even have the correct parts on hand, and so they were unable to maintain their assets. When you're talking defense, it's a large problem, right? We need to be able to know that our equipment is going to function, or we're going to have enough of what we need going forward. So I took a list of subcontractors from the Canadian Department of National Defense, and I applied a k-means clustering algorithm. So I threw hundreds of thousands of pieces of data, and I had it cleaned before, and I threw this into machine learning software, and the result came out with 6 clusters originally. And then I looked and I was like, no, actually, if I set a limit of 5, they're more distinct 5. 2 of them were quite similar, and they had an overlap. So it was like, okay, I can probably squish these together. So then within the cluster, each of these clusters then had its own set of attributes of like, this is the typical lead time, and this is a typical cost. This is the type of parts that fall into this. So then with those attribute information, I could create algorithms for each of these clusters. So the algorithms were actually cluster specific, but they could be part specific as well. And so it minimized this cost while maximizing the part availability. So these algorithms also helped to set ordering quantities and ordering schedules. And of course, then I tested it on the US data that they gave me, and it still worked. So the result was this 34% decrease in excess inventory. So you're saving, hundreds of millions of dollars, and 31% decrease in cost. But there was still that 100% part availability, because now you had the right parts and you knew exactly when you were going to begin to need them to make sure that these assets could be, in the field longer. And it's actually pretty cool because it is being used by some of the Canadian defense subcontractors, and it's proven to be really, really helpful for them. They've saved a lot of money while not losing or sacrificing anything else. So when applied properly, machine learning, any of those algorithms are incredibly helpful. Common issues in forecasting, obviously, I don't know what to sell or what to have on, in the shelf or in my warehouse, right? Operational failure, obviously your machine or your asset could be failing sooner than it should be, right? We've put it into really stressful situations, so the mean time to failure is actually shorter than expected. Again, if you have high turnover in a role like that, knowledge loss happens, and the data will still be there. So using machine learning algorithms there, super helpful. Or just generally miscalculating your demand. You're just underestimating it, or you're overestimating when this service should happen, or this trade-off. So forecasting, easy. Apply, a regression machine learning algorithm. So it just provides that insight into the probability of an event occurring. So you can split your data sets into when something bad happened, this machine crapped out sooner than it should have, versus when it went longer than it should have. And you can find patterns in this data leading up to this event. And then it'll show you, okay, certain warehouses or certain temperatures make this particular part wear out sooner. So again, these are things that are not necessarily seen by the eye because you have resource turnover in roles like that. And so sometimes you have a person, they just have a feeling about it, and it's like, oh, that's cool because you've seen it for 30 plus years, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. So we need to use these machine learning algorithms to figure out what our data is saying and how we can more effectively, order parts. So an example of actual forecasting, this oil and gas company collected all the data from all these different other oil and gas companies. So the one that I worked for was just the data collecting site, and they wanted to figure out how can they better prevent, frac blowouts, because they're incredibly bad for the environment. They're bad for the equipment, and they can impact other wells, right? So leaks, disruptions, lost time due to cleanup, and it's just environmentally unfriendly. So I used machine learning and some regression analysis. So I pulled 30 specific wells, and I looked at the data on when they had events and when they didn't. So I sort of found 3 types of unique signature event patterns. And it was what I then figured out, didn't relate to the change in temperature or how many wells were around it. It was a specific increase in pressure that was prompting these negative fracking events. So what I then did was looked at that data and said, okay, this is the length of time it takes when this pressure hits this, or the difference in the pressure is, greater than 10% or greater than, 20% for this length of time. Remember, I'm getting data every 2 seconds, so I have a lot to work with. You need to ease off the pressure. So what it did is the algorithms were able to, predict an event, and then I got to test this in real time. And the coolest part is that 85% predictive ability, while providing enough lead time for these operators to actually prevent the event from happening. So we could set out a warning system to them, and it would let them know, hey, you are trending towards this specific type of negative event. You want to dial back on your frac pressure. So one final example is just, everyone has issues with demand planning. You want to ensure that right piece of equipment or finance or information is in the right place at the right time in that right quantity. Obviously, inventory issues are you're short on parts, or you have too many parts, you have the incorrect parts, you don't know how well your forecast is your service level being met? Are you actually, or is your supplier meeting that contractual obligation of their specific service level? So again, I used clustering for this because it's just a really great way to find the attributes in and around, and it highlights the issue. So you can use it to alter current part classifications, and better parts obviously allow for better part management or better classes, because classes will tell you this is the average lead time, this is the average amount of money, this is the average demand for this specific attribute. And now you can then create replenishment policies. And it also will let you know one part's actually being used less or suddenly being used less than other parts. And it just gives you all of this information that you don't have to dig up. You can have, these software add-ons to your ERPs, and you can go through and collect all of this information. So with this forecasting events, I worked with a very large global manufacturing company, and it needed to increase their part availability. They just couldn't do their preventative maintenance because they didn't have the parts on hand. And then they ended up having this uncaused downtime because something would break because they didn't do their preventative maintenance. And then we had all of this, expenses in, no joke, there was a picture of a helicopter for a reason, flying parts in, because not having that part on hand meant that the operations would stop, which meant that you're losing thousands upon thousands of dollars every hour, or closer to hundreds of thousands of dollars every hour. So we were called in originally just to look at the fact that they had all these emergency orders, but what we really went through and realized was that it was due to a lack of part availability and not being able to do the performance or preventative maintenance. So we went through and reviewed this part classification structure, and they had 16 different classes, which is mildly overwhelming. Like, how are you going to set replenishment plans, and how do you really know, and why do you need 16 part classifications? So threw it into our machine learning software and just looked and used, k-nearest neighbors. And we found, oh, actually, there's really only 6 clusters that are statistically different from each other. And so certain classes had part inventory that needed to be, monitored or reviewed a lot more frequently. And others needed to have thresholds. Okay, when the inventory in the system goes down to this, we need to place an order. And so it would provide all these flags. Well, what this did was allowed for increased part availability. You're not dealing with 16 different classes and 16 different replenishment, plans. Have 6, and we put it into their system. So it would highlight it. So as long as they continue to actually reconcile and do their inventory counts, this worked. And we told them that you have to keep, doing your part so that the, machine learning and the algorithms and everything that we've set up for you will also continue to work. It's that two-way street, right? If the data is inaccurate, you're going to end up with inaccurate results. So it was great because it reduced the shorts and also the excess parts and the unplanned downtime. So it was a significant reduction in unplanned downtime. And what that did is it dropped the cost of the goods that were, sold. And your preventative maintenance happened on time, and it then reduced those emergency orders. So they didn't have to bring in multiple parts via helicopter in the middle of the night that they are getting from another continent because they had all these issues. So it just saved an incredible amount of money, and it decreased that operational costs significantly. They were very happy, as were their shareholders. So it's really cool what you can do with, machine learning and how it applies and how it's well used in supply chain. But of course, you need to set yourself up for success. So the best way to start is to, have a specific question for the model and that you are trying to answer. So when will this asset fail? How often do I need to order this item, right? Be specific, because if you're not, you'll end up with a very generic, boring answer that doesn't really help you. Then you need to make sure that your data is cleansed, it's properly labeled, it's properly entered, because if it's not, you have something that's not unique being viewed as unique. Then you want to select the appropriate algorithm, right? You just saying, oh, we're going to use AI or machine learning. It's like, okay, well, which machine learning algorithm is going to be best for this scenario, right? So understanding which one to use and the data that it really depends on. Then you want to choose sort of parameters, put a limit around things, and have a specific, outcome. What is the health of the asset, or when does the asset go to failure? How much is too much inventory, or how little is too little, right? Putting some limits on it. And then of course you want to let your machine learning, software review as much data as possible. The more data it has, the better it will do, because it can find more and more patterns in it. But again, if that data isn't great, you're going to end up where you don't hire any females, or where you have a problem with some of the, other, hiring, or a crisis in healthcare because we've used, not great data sets. So again, just knowing how to set yourself up for success and telling your students how to set themselves up for success when they're trying to use it. So that wraps up what I had to say about using and actually having used machine learning and AI in supply chain. So that is all I have for today.
Thank you, Danica. That was amazing, fascinating to listen to. That you could help governments and companies save that much money, like 34% decrease in inventory.
Yep.
That's insane.
It's a lot of money, right? And you don't realize it until you go through and you're looking at, the person in finance comes and just slides you this and says, like, this is where we went. This is like the swing now that we've employed that. And you're like, there's a lot of zeros after that number.
Yeah.
So it's cool. Because it's money that is useful elsewhere, right? And you just don't know. But again, you can go the opposite way. You can end up spending and blowing budgets because you've used AI in, the wrong way. Essentially, you haven't cleaned your data, and so it's just running amok with it. Because again, it doesn't have that intuition like humans do.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to invite anyone, if you have any specific questions for Danica, go ahead and you can enter that in the chat right now. I also want to let you know that Danica has a case study that she wants to share with everyone, and we're going to be putting that in the handout section right now. So that should be popping up on your screen. So go ahead and click and you can download that. That's something that you can use in your classroom. It is on the fracturing that you were talking about. So also, just, it looks like, I don't know, I don't see any questions popping up, but you're very detailed, Danica. I think that might be the reason why. But I was just wondering if you have, like, it sounds like you've worked in such a variety of fields and such. What's been the most fun project that you've worked on? What's been the most, or like maybe the one that was the most shocking to you, like the results were the most shocking?
I think it definitely would have been some of the stuff that I did for the military. Just, you don't really realize the impact, because I think most governments just throw money at it. And it's like, okay, we'll just fix it. We'll throw money at the problem, and then seeing how some simple understanding of their data can actually really help pull, make things better in all aspects, right? Like, you still ended up with all this part availability. In fact, the part availability increased, yet the cost decreased. You're like, that doesn't make sense. And then obviously I'm using it with all the research I'm doing for my PhD, and people don't understand. They're like, oh, like how does supply chain and medicine go? It's like, well, I'm trying to improve a specific function so that patients going through their supply chain of like finding a specialist, of getting diagnosed, happens a lot faster. So it's great in medicine, but it's also hilarious when you get given data and you're like, I don't think this is really clean, and then you look at the results and you're like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, some of the healthcare stuff I've done, and then some of the, honestly, all the projects, I think they're all super fun because I quite often find different things. I did work for a transportation company, and they would have sold their soul saying that this was the problem, and I found that it was not, and all the data said elsewise. That the thing that they thought was not the problem at all was helping was actually the big hindrance. So it's just amazing to use all this data.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we do have a couple questions coming through now. So Gary's asking, how can we use AI to teach supply chain? Any good tips?
Use AI to actually teach it. Well, what you could have is you can show just the difference in having good data versus bad data, because I think in supply chain in general, using AI or not using AI, decisions are made based on data that's collected. So showing your students, hey, well, you can use this fancy technology all you want, but if you put in crappy data, you're going to get it out. So you can use, like, say, Chat GPT off of OpenAI and have them ask it, pretty generic questions, or like, how would you design a supply chain for this, or a procurement process, and then give it really specifics and see the outcome to show them, like, this is why you need to do all your work. AI is not going to do everything for you. You have to do a lot of the legwork beforehand, and then show them that the outcomes are so different. Because I also teach project management, and I have some of my students, I'm like, yeah, go for it, use AI. And you'll see that if you, again, like the garbage in, garbage out, if you put crappy info in, you're going to get a crappy result out. So just showing them how beneficial it is, or can be, when they've set themselves up for success in using it. Or you can have them use some of the, like, OpenAI software to run, demand planning, and then don't clean the data for them, and then just tell them to, like, run it without cleaning it, and then tell them to run it after they've cleaned the data, and they can look at that, the differences in the outcomes that they find. Like, sometimes they will get lucky and other times they won't. So that's a couple of the ways to do it.
Nice. Teresa's asking if you've noticed in your research any disparity in accuracy in the use of AI over time.
Absolutely. Again, it depends on the data that the algorithms are using. So if you already have discrepancies in the data and what it's pulling through, it's going to continue down that trend. It's just an echo chamber. And so if there's continuously, bad data put in, or not accurately labeled or descripted data, it can get worse and worse and worse, and you get farther and farther off of course. And sometimes you don't really know what the actual course is supposed to be, and so you've been pulled off to the side and you don't know it until it's too late. Point in case like that Amazon example with their hiring, is like, this is great, until it would not hire or recommend a single female, because it's like, oh, it was actively weeding them out because it's looking at this already biased data set. So that's part of the problem. The other part is the trust. So we know that in certain types of medicine, especially like the radiology side, that AI is so strong. It's very good because it's very clean data sets, but then you have the technicians and the radiologists that don't necessarily want to trust it. So then they'll do their own, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you've actually pulled it off course. So yeah, it's something to be very careful of and aware. And I think that's the most important part for me, is like, you need to understand how these algorithms work, because once you understand it, you can see how you can end up off course. So it's that understanding. I think we need to have a better understanding, humans do, of how it functions and how it works, and how the data that you give it is so crucial to its output.
Thanks, Danica. RG is asking, with the very fluid sanctions and the like, how can we use AI to predict supply chain issues and alternatives?
Again, so you're looking at it at previous data. So perhaps maybe not predicting the issues, but it can highlight, if this event happens, this is what you should do, or you can stock a little bit more. I think we're so focused on that lean supply chain where we want like just in time. We don't have inventory on hand anymore. It's like, oh, that's a waste of money. We can do other things. And then you have a big issue that happens. So I think if anything, it's shown that there needs to be a little bit more redundancy, because when these events do occur, and they are using AI in, weather prediction and whatnot, but with supply chain, again, it's so personal to each company how it operates. So I would use it more, not to predict like different supply chain events, but for each company to use it to say, okay, if this happens, what happens to your supply chain, or how does your supply chain function, and where are your suppliers located? Just having a better understanding so that when something bad does happen, a recall on a really important product, how they can adjust, or they have things, backup plans. So setting it to, test your own supply chain rather than predicting future risks, because that's really hard to do. You can just predict how it'll impact, or how previous events have impacted your company, and then having a plan to handle that. So having a little bit more inventory, or noticing, ooh, there's some civil unrest in some places where we are going. So maybe we need to have better supplies on hand, or more of this type. So I think that's more of a way that we can look at it, because like supply chain is so personal to each company, and then globally each company impacts that supply chain. But if we look at ourselves first, try and figure out the issues with our own company or where we could go wrong, then we'll improve that global supply chain with when those events occur.
Great. Thanks, Danica. We have some good comments, even some tips that professors, Brennan has a good tip in here of how he uses AI and ChatGPT with his students. So I encourage you to read those. We're out of time for our questions, but if you have any additional questions or would like to connect with Danica, feel free to click a link that we're going to put on the screen here, and you can connect with her. Danica, thank you so much for this presentation. It was so insightful and interesting, and I'm excited to look over the case study that you gave out.
That'll be fun.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye. We want to thank all of you for your participation in the chat and in the polls. And we have selected our first winner for the $25 gift card. And this one is for being active in the chats. And our winner is Gary. So Gary, congratulations. Our team is going to reach out to you, and they'll let you know how we can get you that gift card. I also, before we bring out our next speaker, I want to show you a quick video that showcases the expert sessions in our supply chain courseware. Expert sessions are short videos created by industry professionals that help students get a feel for real-world scenarios in real-world careers. And they are integrated in our courseware and take away any of the hassle that you might have as an instructor for trying to book a speaker to come to your class. So as we bring up this video, and as you watch this video, I want to remind you still that we're giving you free instructor access to Danica Porter's Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations courseware. So with that instructor access, you'll be able to see the expert sessions that we have in this course and any other features that we have. So go ahead and you can click on that link also. And we'll start the video now.
Get industry expertise on demand with Stukent Supply Chain and Logistics Bundles. Each courseware includes powerful expert sessions, which bring industry professionals into your classroom at the click of a button.
I'm so excited about the experts that we have lined up to provide information to our students. We have some really experienced practitioners who have 30, 40 years, some of them in the industry, and in a lot of different focused areas. that I think the students are going to find very valuable.
Usually a textbook is almost the opposite of industry integrated curriculum, and we're looking to supplement a textbook with guest speakers and with visits or with maybe practitioner adjuncts. I think this courseware will bring an integration point with it because of the expert sessions and the videos. I mean, it's built-in guest speakers, which is great.
Each expert session helps you bridge the gap between your curriculum and the real world, bringing established experts and longtime practitioners into your classroom. These powerful sessions reinforce the concepts you're teaching and help your students gain additional insights into the material.
The biggest challenge, I think, is it's just going to challenge the way that they have viewed a supply chain. You know, so many people are stuck in it being like, it's only for manufacturing, it's only at a large scale. And I think people forget that supply chains are so, all-encompassing, and they don't just relate to, hard and fast goods. So that's definitely the challenge that the students will have to get their head around.
Each expert session also features an accompanying auto-graded quiz, which makes it easy to assess your students' understanding of the material. To see how these expert sessions can elevate your course, schedule a walkthrough with a Stukent course consultant today, and be sure to stay current with Stukent.
All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video. I just want to encourage you to request free instructor access. I've watched these expert sessions. They're amazing, they're fascinating, and I know that your students will love them. So moving on, supply chain is such a dynamic field that changes and evolves almost daily. And this year, the logistics and transportation industry has been affected by various strikes that really could have seriously impacted our day-to-day life. To speak a little bit more on logistics and transportation, we have Dr. Rodolfo Santamaria from Western Governors University. Dr. Santamaria, I'm going to invite you onto the stage now. Dr. Santamaria has over 35 years of experience leading business transformations, strategy development, operations management, IT, and supply chain. He's also a lecturer, program director, and researcher with over 12 years of experience in remote and in-person instruction. So welcome, Dr. Santamaria.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. I am going to hop off stage. I'm going to turn the time over to you. When we finish, I'll hop back on and we'll do a Q&A, okay?
Okay, thank you. I take it from here. So during my career, it's 40 years, adding 5 years when I was in school, and I can relate what Stuart was saying. I always struggle in my life because I speak 3 languages, and it's very different. And the way that you think in the different environment, and when you are in manufacturing, when you are in product retail, and also in service companies. I have the pleasure, and I say pleasure now, that I work for companies such as Stanley Black & Decker, also for ADT, that is one of the biggest private equity security companies today, Johnson Controls as Tyco International. Also, Faris Ventures is a big company, and also private equity, Platinum Equity, that had the chance to really be working with the CEO as a vice president for one of their portfolio companies. And also Grupo Vitro, that's the biggest glass manufacturer in the world, that is stationed in they have a lot of furnaces around the world, and it's coming from Italy. And also in semiconductors. That gave me the expertise to really start working on what I want to do the next. And I remember when I was really small in elementary school and I saw a man landing on the moon, and this struck me since then. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I said, I want to do something in my life. I want to be and do something, or my family has to do something. I decided to become a pilot. I was living in overseas in a small country called Costa Rica in Central America. And I said, well, how do I start here? And I was in 5th grade, I believe. And I started to say, okay, I want to be a pilot. So I started just working my way through. I never thought differently. So I didn't have that opportunity then. and I became an engineer. And I worked for an American company. This American company transferred me to the United States. And when I got here into the United States, I was exposed to what it was called then just transportation and logistics, that the concept of supply chain was well defined, and decided to go, okay, so what this is, because I needed to do 60 credits just to recognize my degree from Costa Rica into United States. And I said, I'd better reinvent myself. My kids were really small, and I said, again, one small step, and I just to move forward. So I decided to go into my MBA, and then decided after that going to my PhD. And again, important to note that I am Spanish speaking, and I needed to do my PhD in English. And also I chose a very difficult topic, that is macroeconomics, to do my dissertation. And it was not that easy. So how can really evolve and help the people, and what should I do? So I started being involved in, okay, supply chain. I did that in my country. I said, okay, what that is. So how do I put these things together? I started as a buyer. Then before that, in my country, I started like in manufacturing. It was just changing the oil here and doing something on the ground. And I said, no, I want to become a leader here. I want to become that. I want just to be something. I want to really help people. And then I saw an opportunity going into, okay, being a buyer. I said, okay, I can buy things, move things around, and start just to what the steps, and it would be global, what global means at that time. So I don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Chinese. So what should I do? So I started to really start moving and say, okay, so that's this concept came along. I said globalization. So what that means? Okay, so complex, interconnected processes, and then I decided to go into deeper into that. So I then into e-commerce. So what is e-commerce? So we just started with the internet. So how do we do that? And it was great that Danica just talked about AI and machine learning. That does not exist before that. So imagine that doing it in paper. I don't know if you imagine yourself today without any computer or an iPhone in your hands. An iPhone is your life, and say, okay, so what should it do next? So who's doing where? The social media. So you put something there and everything the next day become viral if you do something wrong or something very good. So new technologies comes along. So now all of a sudden logistics and transportation become something. So being in moving goods from one place to another and transportation, and I came to an idea, said, okay, so if we move goods, we can move bytes, BYTES. So we can move digital information. So how we can do that? So I started just to get into see how these two will come together, and I got very involved into the digital space. It wasn't called digital then, so it was zeros and ones, and then an importance of logistics, because there is a lot of pirates out there. There is a lot of ways that we need just to really maintain the cost down, how to improve the customer service, how we can put together our locations, manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, inventory closer to the customer. And again, thinking from the leadership perspective. Okay, looking from top down and say how we can improve this, how we can do that, how we can really get things going in to reduce costs, improve this customer service, and increase the profits for the company. So then a lot of challenges started to come. So how do we go about that? What do we do? And then volatility. I was in charge of a region that is an earthquake prone. And we had, for those of you that know the mining industry, Chile is one of the biggest producer of copper ore. And they send the products into the United States just to become ingots and then so on for cables and Canada. So an earthquake, big earthquake, 7.2 hit Chile. So at that time, my God, so how do we move this along? How do we move this? How do we get copper? Where do we go? And this caused a lot of political instability also in other countries, economic crisis all over the place. And then it would be more complex in order to start moving that. How do we move things faster, and how we can manage all this information at the same time? God, it was really emotional. And from the leadership perspective, I remember going to my boss with bad news every day. And something that I learned early on is when I go to my boss with a problem, I had to have at least 2 solutions. And so I came say, let's talk about information, security, how we can communicate, how we can close and open our containers and send us a signal. So what are you talking about? How we can do that? So we started just to talk on ways of doing that. So, and I remember going to South Africa and saying, okay, how we can, I was looking at NASCAR one Sunday, and I saw a big bag getting in a truck where these cars are getting the fuel from and getting into the cars, a bag. So today we were paying, at that time, we were paying around $12,000 to move liquids around the world. And I said, okay, so what if we put these liquids into bags? So what kind of bags are there? So I remember at that time it was Sealand, and say, can we put a bag in your truck? They said, excuse me? Yes, can I put a bag in your truck? I mean, this cargo, I pay for the weight, and I just start moving cargo. So I was with a company based in Minnesota, and they gave me the go ahead just to go in innovation and say, hey, I want to move bags. And they thought that I was crazy. I mean, this is something, all the innovators are crazy, right? So they said, okay, Rodolfo, we're gonna give you at least 2% to check, to test this. I said, thank you, boss. I went to South Africa. I bought these bags. I filled them in PVA, it was the name of the chemical. And I started moving, and immediately the cost of moving this bag was 30% of the cost. The rest is history. That gave me the chance to go into the United States and gave me 2 regions in order to improve that and scale that up, just using bags. A different type of innovation. People come to me, no, it needs to be a stainless steel, and it needs to be, you cannot move milk in this. I said, yes, you do. Yes, you do. This is a food grade. So we started moving bags around the world. So it was an interesting thing that at the time it was the future. So what can we do? Today is different. Today we have e-commerce, and you're talking about the way that you want to call e-commerce. The digital commerce, you have big companies like Amazon and the Walmart and the Chinese companies in Asia. They're all reliable because when you order something, you expect that to come the next day. How does product get there? And again, from the leadership perspective, so what can we do? So one of the things that I was looking and listening to Danica got me very excited, because this is what I saw before. This is what we're living now. And this is it. This is today. We're there. So how can we use that wisely? That's the key, and ethically. So supply chain is a good candidate. But we can go and use that in the supply chain. So how can we do? I went to MIT for a certification and got IoT and blockchain and cybersecurity. Say, can we have this cybersecurity thing? So how we can use the IoT, how I can get the data, and how we can move this. So I tasked my team and the business intelligence. Said, guys, I need to analyze how we can get all this data from this machine, because I'm an advocate. I'm a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma, and I said, okay, I want to see metrics, I want to see data, and I want to make some decisions based on the metrics. So what data are you bringing back to me? And the same applies for the service company like banks, insurance companies, recruiting, higher education, the same as product like Stanley Black & Decker, like tools, like many others. They're the same. It's just the way that you apply the concept. So I wanted to have a standard concept all along. from the leadership perspective. I want to have something that I can put my hands on and convert it into a highly profitable or reduced cost information for me. And then sustainability came along. I said, okay, so what's sustainability? So I remember my formation in my country was green. So we use a lot of eolic and a lot of electrics and hydraulics. So I said, okay, so how can we do that? And I started just to get involved with partners and say, or reduce, they call it now carbon print and all of that, but it's just a matter of reducing cost. So how can you do things efficiently? I got two sons. One is a rocket scientist. He's the spacecraft subsystem lead to maintain the astronauts alive for the new lunar lander. So picking his brain, I said, what's next? How do you do that? I said, well, I'm working with Artemis, I'm working with this, and I'm working with that, and I have to do all this data. So how you get the data? Well, we have the Dragon today that goes into the space station, and now Boeing is going on to have the other one, and I get the data, and I analyze the data. Yeah, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for patterns and redundancy. Okay, patterns and redundancy. That stuck with me. I said, okay, so when you do patterns, that's the way that you look for in any of operational excellence metrics. So what are the patterns here? So when you define the issue, then you start got the metrics to analyze and then control. So what do you do? Then you go into innovations again, say patterns. And then I went to my other son. My other son is a director of public health and a doctor in Johns Hopkins University. So I picked his brain and said, how did you go about COVID-19? So what do you do? How do you keep your numbers so low? I said, I went against the establishment in my town. I was really very stringent. I presented the data, I presented the algorithm, and I said, for every person that comes in infected, 4 or 5 will be infected in a day, and then after 10 days, you start seeing dead people. So just put it in layman words. So I said, if he started to do that, I said, okay, so how can I go that into logistics and transformation and pass that into the students, pass that into the employees just to make sound decisions? So again, we started using this data analytics. Okay, so again, I'm great. I was excited just to hear Danica and the way she did it and the way she's passionate about that, because we need a person like her in order just to, as a leader, guide her, do this, do that, move here, get here. I want you to analyze this. So this example that I got in big data, this is similar to what Danica just shared. It's 10% reduction in cost and 5% increase in sales to start, just to start. And then how we can go new. This 21st century supply chain view, again, it's not new. It just happens that from the year 1999 went into the year 2000, and everyone was afraid of this digital transformation is going to happen in the computer. Everything will start to crash down. And then, like the Moore's law, every 18 months, the information technology changes. So what are we expecting? Now you're seeing a lot of politicians going around artificial intelligence. Oh, I want them to recognize my face. This has been going on since 2007. I was in the security industry. For those of you involved in Blackberries, BlackBerry started with that. Those are the brains in the market for security. Today, the security industry is so strong that they can open and close your house if you want to, just reading your magnetic signals. Every one of us has personal magnetic signals. So these devices can really read you, and when you're close into home, maybe 10 feet away, your locks started to open, your lights started to move, and many other things. So be scared, because it's here and has been here for a while. Now it's because they are ready to market. There are big companies investing in what's the next step. So what that means into transportation. Okay, so let's put it in perspective. So we're going into third parties, we're going into 3PLs, 4PLs, so we can do that. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to start really investing into growing this industry to get the products or services closer to the customer. Globalization was there before, and it was getting closer, even being global. You can get a product from China today in 7 days. I don't know if you knew that, but you can order it in Amazon or eBay or Alibaba, and then you hit that, and if you clear customs correctly, it would be in your house within 7 days. So these are the kind of things that really have us thinking. So my God, this is crazy. This is crazy. What do we need to do? So for me, being an operational excellence practitioner and an innovator in whatever I do, and I said, okay, so what can make a significant impact next? So big data, analytics, visibility. How do we move things around? Well, this has been here. So what's the impact that I want to create from these innovations? Okay, look at the self-driving vehicles today. 4 years ago, people were afraid of cars driving by itself. So you can really sleep in the car. How many accidents? 4 or 5. Okay, out of maybe 1 million cars that are out there. Of course, it's important this for accidents because you learn from them, like the aviation industry. You learn from the accidents, you get safer and safer and safer. That's innovation. So now, when you go, how can we make the impact in the supply chain? Being a leader, when you are in a leadership position, you have the chance to make a difference. Being an innovator, using people like Danica, say, hey, I want to go this route. I want to go that route. Let's look at this. Let's move things around. How we can work with providers and make things better for them. How we can get transportation more efficient. How we can move this around. So you as a leader, this is how you think. Doing it with people that know better than you. So your team has to be always better than you in order for you to be successful. And this is what we need, the future of global supply chain innovation. So what are the areas that are coming to come? Okay, again, you saw in Danica's presentation, artificial intelligence. The other one, blockchain technology. Everyone is afraid of that. Oh, Bitcoins, and oh my goodness, how we can do that? Well, that's the cost of innovation. You have some failures, you have some crooks along the way too. But again, these are the kind of things that you need, again, thinking in the future. The 3D printing today, you will be amazed what the type of materials that are out there today in the automotive industry, and a lot of them also in the aviation industry. So they have to go through stringent safety procedures in order to do that. But it is important to have that information, metrics back, in order just to really preclude people say, oh, 3D, oh, I got a harness in 3D. Okay, so I always a firm believer in innovation. Corvette has been my passion for a while. I have a Z51 because I thought that was the best car out there. Not the new one, but it was the C7. And why? Because I saw the innovation coming through since I was a small child. I loved them. So, and I said, when is the time to get one? So I said, well, when I think the innovation is there and I can do that. Well, I did it. And this car has a lot of 3D printing in it, believe it or not. So, and it is important to have that. Why? Because they drive the cost down. These innovations are important. On how do you really see if these innovations are worth it? Well, metrics. Go back. Big data and analytics. Get your data analytics. Big business that use that 10% lower cost. They can predict demand, identify the risks. how we can do that, how we can use whatever they are, exponential, smoothing, regression, algorithms, so whatever. So we need to get people in our team that are able to provide that metrics for persons like me, can make some decisions for everybody. This is important to have that. We are creating leaders. Our students are leaders of tomorrow. So we need to equip them with the right information to make the right decisions. And one of the notions that I said, when I get to a level where I need to pass my experience out there, even they like it or not, I go into teaching. I can continue to go being in the industry. I can continue being a chief operating officer. I can continue being in the board somewhere. I chose to go and pass information to students. That was it. I made that decision 3 years ago, and now I'm here doing that. And this is my passion. How do you can really get this new, let people not be afraid of innovation. Innovation has their failures, yes. But again, go back into the self-driving vehicles, global market for drones. Have you seen the Olympics? Have you seen these big events now that you can see all these drones flying by? You think that they flying by people just having each one of them? No. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, programming, digital. Imagine now with these two powerful countries, Ukraine and Russia, having a war. If they want to, they can kill everybody. They are choosing to strike little bits and pieces to really tease the West or really tease the East or really tease others. But they can wipe anyone out anytime. So again, innovation is out there. So how can we do really to get this innovation going forward, and how we can nurture providers to really work with us, moving products closer. Now we are getting into near shore from offshore. So we're getting very close into having these products. I order products, what people were not thinking about maybe even a year ago. I ordered a product at night and it arrives early in the morning in my house from Amazon. So these 3PLs make it happen. I live in Indiana. You have more than 12 million square foot corridor between Kentucky and Indianapolis. You got the biggest distribution center that I ever seen in my life. I had the chance to work as a chief information officer one company in my past and set up all the virtualization for Amazon servers in the different distribution centers. So I had the chance, and the biggest I have seen at the time was 1 million square foot. Today, we have one here, like maybe 10 minutes from my house, that is 2.5 million square foot with around maybe 500 doors each side. And this is the way that we are. These are the 3PLs, and they work with the third parties too. Walmart has that. And also regulations. So how we can go and make sure that regulations are there in order just to really control this scale up, and so labor. So how we can really go and have the labor needed. Students. That's one of the reasons I went into education, in higher education. We need, as leaders, people that can make decisions, that can make things happen for you ethically, fast, with data. And these demands are growing and growing. Why? Because operations operational excellence supply chain is based on metrics. So the growth for this is expected between 7% between 2020 and 2030. So how we can feel that? Again, the need for technology. In order to do that, we need to prepare our students, employees of the future leaders, on how they can be at ease with technology. This is very important. This is something that you have to have in front of you at all times. For the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, 77% of supply chain professionals said that their companies are investing in new technologies, and 63% said that they are hiring employees with technology skills. What that means, technology skills. Look at what Danica just presented to us. So high level, great metric driven, great information, but imagine people that like her that we need in the market today, how we can get them, how we can really nurture them, how we can really motivate them to continue. The shortage, this is the biggest problem we have. Not because they want to, because they're not used to. Go back into innovation. You have laggards and you have people that really embrace the adopters for the innovation. And they have people in the middle that need some time in order to adjust. But those laggards will stay behind. In any transformation that I have done in my life, more than 33% of the labor needed to be restructured, either because they didn't have the skills, they didn't want to continue growing, or they didn't want to do it. The opportunity was there, but they didn't want to embrace it. And that's a fact. And this is where these issues are happening today. Baby boomers today are being tapped in the shoulder and say, please, can you go back and help me set this up? Please, I need someone from the leadership perspective that can really move this. And again, a baby boomer with no innovation. Again, we go back to the old ways. We don't want to go to the accounting in paper. So we really want to use Office all along, and Tableau, and have this technology in front of you, and have this software, a Minitab, so in order just to get the data from you. So the global shortage for skilled supply chain workers are expected to reach 8 million for 2030. Again, increasing 7%, and also the shortage 8%. How we can bridge that gap? Leaders like us here. That's why, again, go back in my motivation of going into higher education. I need these leaders for my sons, for my family, for my grandsons. Because we want a country that can really analyze data, not afraid of education. We need data-driven people. We need people that can really think ethically, that can think innovative, and can have the data in front of them. Look at the facts. And then the other part is wages. Well, today the average wage for logistics and supply chain managers is around 108,000 by May 2020. Remember, this is public information. The current information that I use, I can share, but I can share the 2020. 25% higher than the average. Then imagine what it is today with all of this technology that is all around us. Also, I'm a firm believer in diversity, equity, and inclusion because I was part of that. I needed to learn culture. I didn't know what the acronym, United States work with acronyms. I was not aware of those. Still today, I have issues with acronyms. I need to know what they are because APA can mean many things to many people. And when we say let's say supply planning, SNOP, SOP, well, standard operating procedures, or sales and operations processes, or sales and operations. So I needed to learn that. So we needed to really see how we can just really get into the lingo piece and how to really get acquainted with the different cultures. Because if you bring somebody from the outside, when I said the outside, coming from overseas in another language or another culture, they need to be really aware of what you got. So that's why inclusion is important, and the equity to have the say in what you need to do. And also the other piece that I'm really advocating very hard is to having education in another language. So we have here in the United States, the second growing, the highest growing language in the United States is Spanish, more than 300 million. Are we tapping that market in education? I've been involved only with one university in South Florida that was willing to do an MBA in Spanish. And again, it's the way of thinking. When you are bilingual, it doesn't matter, English and Spanish, but however, usually your primary language is the one that you can really just get it faster. You don't have to think twice. In my areas, when I had to deal with the Italians, for instance, even it's close to Spanish, I had issues just negotiating and having conversations. French, Portuguese, and now Spanish, and now English is completely opposite. They always say that Spanish is backwards than English, and I said no, English is backwards with Spanish. So it's a way sometimes I try to really pause and think on some specific words that I need to really use in order to be polite and really with equity. So it's very important to say here that women make up only 28% of the supply chain's workforce. Look at those numbers. So we need just to really move around. Now, I'm very passionate about this because this is how humans and technology interact. We need to have those humans that can really be prepared to interact with artificial intelligence. Again, go back into what Tanaka presented. It was really timely for me because it is AI. Okay, so you got Internet of Things. So what do you do? How do you use this data? How do you analyze that? How you Walmart embrace that? Always work on being in the vanguard and Amazon. So how they can do that? So I can move the information faster to see the out of stock and how they can just really see the information and the tasks that are needed. And hey, you are behind in your stuff where the task is behind. So how can you do that? How you can really implement something and identify risks before they happen? Tanaka expressed that very well in saying, data, no problem. Artificial intelligence. Music, no problem. That one becomes into a different ways of dealing with information on the way that we communicate. Not only in English, but imagine in other languages. When you have like Puerto Rico, that is part of the United States, they have Spanglish. All over. You go to New York, you go to Chicago, you go to Dallas. You have different parts that you can really see how this is going to be important for artificial intelligence. Okay, so how you deal with culture, how you deal with other languages, how you deal with people with different ways of communication. How do you choose the people of the future that will interact with this and make decisions? Go back into the leaders. The leaders are the one that has to really be aware of what is needed. Internet of Things all over the place. Here, either you like it or not, all the data is there for you. Targeted advertising. When you go into Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, name it, LinkedIn, everywhere. So you are there. Either you like it or not, because this is data, the way you market, the way you do things, your patterns, your metrics. And then, however, the human touch is the most important because you have to make decisions. Don't let the machines make the decisions for you. Again, innovation is good, innovation is great, but it's up to the leaders. How do you want to handle that? How do you really want to go and analyze that? The humans are still responsible for what happened. Again, the machine says 30%, and if you said, yep, 30%, and it was 50%, you're out. The machine will stay there. They will adjust the machine. They will bring another person. And then you get into how do you use this in the supply chain wisely? How you can really upskill your supply chain workers. Stukent has a very well-defined, simulation, because it is the way that you interact. You are sitting in a warehouse and you get bombarded by emails from your friend, from the function, from your employee, from your boss, and then you have to make decisions on the fly. You make that decision and the simulation will tell you, well, not quite. This is what you need to do. So these are the kind of things that start into decision-making process of the leaders of the future. So what you need is that next step. How can you do the 21st century operations and supply chain? And this is one of the things that I'm proud of developing with WGU is how do you really have a professional that can have those skills? I spent in my past more than $50,000 training people because coming out of the university didn't know what to do. They were not aware of how the market operates because it was faster than the university. Technology changes every 18 months. I don't want people just to know Office. I want the new version of Excel. I don't want people just to have the cell that multiply, division. No, I have my phone now just to do that for me. I don't need an Excel to do that for me. I want Excel to be interlink worksheets. I need, again, cubes. I need other things. I need Tableau. We'll be able to go and see different demographics, different cut checks. So these are the kind of things that we're expecting in the future. So to close this and everything that I just said, innovation is very important. And supply chains are all around us. For service companies, as I always say in my classes when I teach, is the students say, I'm in sales, I don't need supply chain. I'm in HR, I don't need supply chain. I am a nurse, I don't need supply chain. And I said, okay, do you know how the surgeon operates? I said, of course. Go into a room, they take the instrument, they just get, and the patient, they are very well. No. Without the instruments, the surgeon cannot operate. Without the machine that is in place in that room, he cannot use it. You cannot get the data from the machine either. If those humans around you are not hired, nothing happens. That's supply chain. Supply chain for a recruiting company, people. Supply chain for higher education, students. Supply chain for a bank, money, how the money gets into the ATM or the teller. Security, how the images when the security is triggered get into the cloud. That's supply chain. How your Amazon order gets into your door. That's through supply chain. How they move the product around. Supply chain is all around us. Don't be mistaken, because and also transportation. Internet happens to be one mode of transportation. They have several layers. Second and third layer is, again, they transport the signals. So how can you do that? So this is the 21st century thinking. You have to be innovative. And now being innovative is having risks. And that's why your boss, the leaders of the future, needs to be aware that innovation has to exist. they need to separate 2 or 3% of their budget in order to do innovation. That's the new blood. Companies that would not innovate today would not be in existence tomorrow. A lot of cases around that. So in order to really have that, it is important for you to know that everything, when you are in education, it starts with you. People will remember you, or people will not remember you at all. Good or bad. I go back into Stuart comment. Oh, yeah, supply chain is something about transportation. Yeah. And very difficult too, because you had data and matrix at the time. There are people that are struggling today in order to have that class really fit into whatever they need to do. So it is important for you to know that you need to be an advocate of innovation. You need to be in any level. And also, as a leader, you need to hire the best people, because you are as good as the people you hire. If you don't have the power to hire, you need to best that you can be. And this is how you get places. Again, go back in my original, that one giant step for man, one small step for man. This is how you start everything in life. So, and with that, I just get into questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Santamaria. That was awesome. I do want to let you know that I have issues with acronyms also. So they can be really tough at times. I do want to invite anyone who has questions to enter them in. I have a couple, and we'll jump right into those. One question is, what are some of the skills that you focus on teaching your supply chain students to ensure they develop the strategic mindset to make business decisions?
Decision making is the first one. Decision making is and critical thinking, those two. Because you have to have those skills in order to have, especially decision making. Sometimes people are afraid to making decisions. And also the critical thinking on, okay, so how do I think critically? Well, you need the data from Danica to make your decisions. And you really have to have the facts in order just to make those decisions. Resources, functions, where do you want to go? These two, I say, teach and really tell the students how to do that. And it has to be hands-on with specific examples.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what current innovative technology are you most excited about and why?
Well, go back into artificial intelligence. I went to MIT, not as deep as Danica, but I was really enticed to see what else will come. Especially, I'm a securities and safety piece, and that's why I mentioned that let's say the magnetism you have, the signals, and they're picking up things that you won't believe. And talking to my son too, so what is coming on what this innovation is going to be, because all these rockets today are full of artificial intelligence and also data coming back. And the other piece is you need to create redundancy in everything you do, because you have to be fail safe. If you do something, you need to have a second one that could back you up. And I'm excited about to hear that, because when you have self-driving automobiles, what happens if this fails? So what's the secondary? You have it in aviation, in the hydraulic system. You got the hydraulic system for the flaps and all of the control surfaces, and then you have a secondary one, and then a third one that is the manual. So you have three. And again, that's back into redundancy, and this is where technology needs to be present.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Dr. Santamaria, for being here with us today. If you have any additional questions or you would like to connect with Dr. Santamaria, feel free to click the link that we're going to put up on the bottom of your screen, and you can connect with him. So thank you so much, Doctor. I'm going to allow you to hop off now, and we'll move on to our next item. Okay, so it's time to announce the winner of our $25 gift card for once again, engagement in the chat. This winner is Therese. So congratulations. Our team will be reaching out to you to get you that certificate. Also, don't forget to hop on to your favorite social media site and post what you're learning about, maybe some insights from today. Use the hashtag StukentDS23, and one lucky winner will receive a $50 gift card from that. And we will announce that winner at the end. And we do want you to be present for that. Okay, at Stukent, we pride ourselves in creating tools that educators and students want to use. And we have another quick video to show you that explains why our courseware and Simternships are so unique to this aspect. And as a special gift to everyone attending today, we want to offer you free instructor access also for our logistics and transportation bundle. With instructor access, you'll be able to preview the entire courseware, including lesson plans, assignments, lecture slides, expert sessions, and more. So go ahead and click on that right now, and you can get your free access. And we'll show the video.
Get the authoritative, up-to-date materials you need to teach an effective course with Stukent Supply Chain and Logistics Bundles. The Supply Chain Simternship and Courseware Bundle keeps your course current with the most up-to-date information in the industry. And the Logistics Bundle helps you teach the internal processes that keep a business running on time. Stukent courseware are developed by industry experts and educators like you, so you know you're getting a curriculum backed by real-world applications and practical pedagogy.
My goal with the Principles of Supply Chain Management and Operations courseware is to introduce people to the world of supply chain. It's to show them that supply chain is a global thing, but also in your day-to-day life. It's not just saved for manufacturing or for plants and factories, it's everywhere.
Logistics and transportation is a dynamic industry. It changes very quickly. And so it is important that we have real currency and recent events mentioned in the courseware and kind of current events explained within the courseware.
But don't just take our word for it. Students love the supply chain courseware and Simternships too.
It's one thing to read the material, however, seeing how it applies to real life adds another level of understanding most other courses do not offer. I love seeing how the materials applied to the real world as I'm a visual learner. It gave me more confidence in my work because I got to mess up before it really mattered.
I never knew learning supply chain could be so engaging and fun. Dr. Clark's supply chain course was easily my favorite course in the entire program. Her experience allowed her to provide insightful perspectives and unique coursework.
The Stukent supply chain materials give your students powerful hands-on experiences with core supply chain management concepts, while providing you with time-saving tools to take the pain out of your course prep. All Stukent simulations feature interactive knowledge checks, individualized feedback, auto-grading, and world-class support for you and your students. To see how the supply chain and logistics bundles can give your students a competitive advantage in the industry, schedule a walkthrough with a Stukent course consultant today. And be sure to stay current with Stukent.
Great. I hope you enjoyed that video. And I do want to give a quick shout out to our video team here at Stukent. We have an amazing video team and they do such a great job on these videos. And I love hearing the student testimonials and what students have to say about our Simternships and courseware. So once again, if you're interested, click on that link, test out the free access and test out the courseware, see what you think, test out the simulation. You won't regret doing that. So for our last session today, we're excited to host a panel discussion with three incredible industry and academic veterans. Our panel discussion topic today is navigating supply chain resilience in an era of uncertainty. And I'm going to kick this off by introducing our panelists, and I'm going to invite them to hop on stage while I do that. So first, we have Vicki Clark. Vicki has over 30 years of industry experience working for Fortune 500 companies. She's a member of the Association for Supply Chain Management, the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, and the Christian Business Faculty Association. She is also the co-author of Stukent's new courseware, Logistics and Transportation Management. She currently teaches a variety of courses as an adjunct for John Brown University, Bryan College, Bethel University, and Ohio Christian University.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank
Vicki.
you. I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you. Next, we have Nate Stemple. Nate is a native of Eastburn, New York, and is a seasoned consultant and entrepreneur, as well as the author of Stukent's upcoming courseware, Advanced Supply Chain, Strategic Concepts and Case Studies. Nate has served 20 years in the US Navy, split between active duty and the reserves. Nate is now a senior consultant for Hidden River Group, where he advises government departments on how to create innovative ecosystems. Nate also consults startups and small to medium businesses in scaling growth, designing their supply chains, and developing their distribution strategies. Welcome, Nate.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, and our last panelist is Lisa Goolsby. Lisa has a unique perspective on the millennial generation, which she has gained through her work as a marketing professor and a coffee bar owner. Lisa has developed strategy for a variety of products and services, and she finds her greatest joy is in the aha moment when her research and strategy collide and products and services succeed. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're so excited to have each of you here today. I'm going to jump right into this. I'm excited to hear insights from all of you on various aspects of supply chain. COVID-19 really brought supply chain into light, and it seems that every year new challenges arise in the supply chain industry. So that brings us to our first topic: supply chain trends and challenges in 2023. So what I'd like is if each of you could share with us a major disruption that occurred in your industry and what factors you believe contributed to that. And I want to start with Nate on this question.
All right, thanks, Paul. I want to talk a little bit about the semiconductor industry. So I'd started a startup, and the technology in the startup was reliant on near field communication, basically like an RFID chip. And so RFIDs have a silicone chip in them as the basis of their technology. And we would have thought that our supply chain was pretty robust, because if you go and you look for like RFID suppliers, you see hundreds of places to get RFIDs. But as we now know, the RFID supply chain has a diamond shape where there are tons of RFID suppliers, but there are only a very, very few silicone manufacturers. And so when the silicone industry was disrupted by COVID, which 55% of the industry is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, and 89.5% of the entire industry is only 5 companies. Everything upstream of those 5 companies now was at risk. And so where we thought a tier 1 supply risk mitigation strategy was fine, when you got to tier 5, all of a sudden everything fell apart, because everything is reliant on these like 5 companies. And so what happened was the auto manufacturers, Apple, like all of these big players now get priority over any silicone coming out of those foundries, and everyone else is kind of like left to fight for the scraps. And we ended up having to cancel quite a few pilots that we were bringing to market, because the lead times had increased so much for the silicone manufacturing that trickled all the way up to just getting an RFID tag. So that was like a very significant disruption that we didn't necessarily anticipate, but then, the hindsight, it's like, well, that's kind of an obvious thing. If you really are looking deep into your supply chain, you could have anticipated.
Thanks, Nate. Vicki, how about you? Any comments on the logistics and transportation perspective?
One of the big ones is the situation at the ports, which now seems to be better, but we are trying to dodge a bullet right now. It's someplace a little more unlikely, and that's at the Panama Canal. And that's because there's a drought. So normally about 36 ships per day go through the locks. And because of the drought, ships are lined up. There were 160 something earlier this week lined up to go through the locks. they are allowing 24 ships a day to go through. And about 40% of our container volume in the United States goes through the Panama Canal. So that has the potential to really cause some blockage there. It can really slow things down. Hopefully, they'll get some rain and the volumes can pick back up again, but that's a lot of ships lined up.
Definitely. Thank you. And Lisa, how about a business perspective for us?
Well, COVID did a lot for small business. I have a couple coffee bars, and where I saw real issues with supply chain was in just being able to get, there were very long lead times. Some things we were not able to get. Cups became a real problem, and you need cups to serve coffee. So we had to get a little bit innovative, and we did a lot with having customers bring in their own cups and doing discounts on refills and things of that nature to avoid the paper and plastic. And our understanding from our suppliers was that those products actually came from China. We couldn't get them, and there were a lot of things too that we were shorted on. Part of the problem was a lack of companies having enough employees to manufacture the products that we needed. So we would place our typical orders, and it would always be sort of a guessing game to see what really came in the order or the shipment and what was shorted and what we didn't have, and then figure out a game plan to deal with it.
Wow. Imagine owning coffee shops and not being able to get cups. Great solution though. So good job with that. Just talking a little bit more, focusing on challenges again. Vicki, as someone in the logistics and transportation industry, can you share with us some thoughts on the closure of Yellow Freight after 99 years of operations, and how you think this event will affect other transportation channels in the near future?
I got my start in just hardcore transportation, and I worked closely with Yellow Freight for years and years and years. As far as history goes, it breaks my heart to see that happen. However, about the time I left transportation and went into the trade compliance arena, Yellow bought Roadway, and then they bought Holland, and then they bought some other small carriers. And I feel like that the big issue is that they were never integrated. The volumes were so high for Yellow and Roadway that they just kept operating like they always operated. And the same thing when they bought the T&T companies, Holland and Redaway, and I forget the others. But everything was moving. Freight was a good business to be in, and so they didn't make any adjustments to take economies of scale and to take advantage of what they had there that worked together. They were still very much individual companies, and I think they realized too little, too late. And they began this priority called One Yellow, but by that time it was too late for them. And they blame the Teamsters, and the Teamsters blame Yellow, and who even knows? Probably the blame lays somewhere in between all that. But I do know that some of the smaller regional carriers, I'm thinking Saya Motor Freight in particular, has seen a great uptick in their business just in the last 30 days. And of course, with the Teamsters threatening to strike, then any good transportation manager is going to start moving some of that volume to other carriers and making sure that those relationships are in place and that there are rates in place. And so that reduced what they had in the pipeline. which made them even less profitable than they were before. You know, Yellow had 10% of the LTL capacity nationwide. And so that's a pretty significant amount. They've always been a low cost carrier. And so, you know, low cost means low rates. People who are not already set up with some alternatives and with that redundancy that was talked about earlier, they're probably seeing some pretty high rates come back, and some of them probably paying twice what they're accustomed to paying, just because, you know, they're not those economies of scale that Yellow Freight had. Another good thing to do is, you know, if you're in that mess that's in the aftermath of all that, is to look and see if you can consolidate shipments and do what we used to call a milk run, where we would load shipments for 4 or 5 companies on a truck, 4 or 5 locations, and send them around and use that truckload capacity. I'm looking at my notes. I did make some here. I think they went from, just after the Teamsters started talking strike, at the beginning, Yellow had about 50,000 shipments a day in the pipeline. And by the time that it was all over, they had less than 10,000. So that's pretty significant drop, and therefore a drop in revenue. Did I answer all that? I did see this morning that Estes has placed a $1.3 billion bid to buy all the terminals. And so that should help. And they have secured some financing, $100 million from Citadel and another $42.5 million from MFN. Interestingly, the Estes bid is a stalking horse bid, so somebody could come up and outbid them. So we'll see what happens there.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep your eye on. Thanks, Vicki. That was great. Lisa, Nate, do you have any other insights to add to this from your perspectives?
Well, I mean, everything we get comes by freight trucks. So anytime there's a disruption or even talk of it, I know there's been driver shortage for a long time. And so that always worries me. I had one order for a table. We needed more tables in our cafe area. And I know that it took months for that table to get into our possession. So I always worry. I always look for multiple suppliers. If one company can't provide what I need, where can I get it? Otherwise, Amazon business has been a real source of help for some of the things that I have. But of course, again, everything I get from my coffee bars comes by freight. So it's an issue.
Yeah, I would add, Paul, just from a more generic management of upcoming disruptions place, 2 things that I would encourage people to consider that are managing supply chains is, you know, increase your transparency of your supply chain. And so there's a lot of technologies now for inventory tracking. Where is it in the system? Is it in the pipeline? Is it in a distribution center? Is it, you know, still in a warehouse? And so the additional information you have on that allows you to respond more accurately and maybe come up with more creative problem-solving solutions on, hey, there's a chunk of this somewhere in the world. Now we know where it is. Now we can contact the right people to try to get it unstuck, to try to get it moving, to try to get it back to where it's supposed to be in the supply chain. The other thing that I think is super important, and there are some systems now that are in place, is for you to create systematic ways to anticipate disruptions. And this is where you can look at leading indicators of both, you know, an impending disruption or like a change in consumer behavior as well. And, 2 examples that I would give, companies like Resolink, who map your entire supply chain, and then they'll give you alerts if there is something that is at risk of disruption, which could be, hey, your contract manufacturer in Myanmar, and Myanmar is now has a coup going on, and like now you get an automated alert that like, hey, you might want to think about reallocating your contract manufacturing capacity because this is a huge risk, right? A lot of clothing and apparel was coming out of Myanmar, and that coup really messed up a lot of companies' supply chains. And you don't want to take action after you realize those boxes aren't leaving their distribution center. You want to be able to take action in advance. And so having leading indicators of those kinds of disruptions is super critical. And then the other thing you can do, a very underutilized resource, in my opinion, even just like Google Trends, where you can get access to what people are Googling, and you can see trends and changes in consumer behavior based on what they're searching the internet for. And that gives you advanced notice of, hey, we look at this every day and this is the relative activity, but if whether it's a spike or a decrease, that's going to be one of your like first indicators in consumer behavior change is a change in their interest, which usually shows up in like Google research data.
Great. Thank you, all three of you, for those insights. I'm going to move on to our next topic now, leveraging data analytics for supply chain optimization. And I'd love to hear from each of you on data analytics and how you think it will improve the various aspects of supply chain. And I think I want to start with Nate on this one.
Yeah. So data, you know, it's easy to kind of just say like data is prolific, it's everywhere, but companies have to understand there's real investments to be made, and you should be strategic about how you're spending to get data. And so, you know, I think about start with an outcome that you want and make sure that that outcome is tied to your competitive advantage in your industry. And so, and you know, an example would be, I am a commodities distributor, and I want to reach all of like the rural areas in, let's say, India, a huge market, huge, vast country expanse, and you want to be competitive by reaching the most customers as you can. And so you want to do route optimization. And so in order to do that, what data do you need? And so I start with the outcome, and then I track back to, okay, how do I become more competitive? Well, I need to know in real time where my fleet is, and I need to correlate that to where the orders are. And in order to know in real time where my fleet is, I probably need to install GPS trackers on all my trucks. And so now I'm able to make an investment on a data source that is then going to inform the strategic capability for me to maintain or create competitive advantage. And so what I do is really I look at the outcome, I make sure it's tied to a competitive advantage, and I walk back to making sure we're making smart investments on data that really matters.
Thank you, Nate. Vicki, how do you teach students to use data to drive optimization?
I come from a freight payable background. It was one of my hats I wore for several years. And I'm a big believer in using freight payable data actually, that's one of the first places I go when I start a new job, is to go and look at the freight payable data and see what are we shipping, where is it going, what kind of weights, who are we using, who are the carriers, what are we paying, all of that information, because believe it or not, there are about 100 fields of information in a freight bill. So if you can capture all of that, then there's a lot of slicing and dicing you can do. This was pre-big data, so now there's a lot more capability to slice and dice that data without somebody sitting there doing pivot charts like I used to do. But I think that's really telling, because if you know the zip codes where your customers are and it's time, you know, you need to reduce the transit time, then that's a good way to sit down and look at, you know, where are my customers and where do I need to be to service them in 24 to 48 hours? Do I need to open another warehouse, or, you know, do I need to ship to a third party and let them warehouse it for me? How do I need to handle this? And so we just talk a lot about what does the data tell you, and kind of how to interpret it. So nothing fancy. You know, most of my students come in and they've got some background in data management already. So it's more like, here are the things that you can look for.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. Lisa, what opportunities does data analytics provide for your business?
So we look at data all the time. We get a lot of information from our point of sale. So we know what size cups are selling the most. So we know what kind of inventory we need to have in like safety stock in case there is a cup shortage again. We do just-in-time inventory, and we want to see that inventory turn every single week. As a small business, we can't afford to be sitting on a stock room full of stuff that's not moving. So we really look at the numbers coming out of our point of sale to analyze and see what's moving, what's not moving, and where we need to be looking to have a little bit of safety stock, or where there might be some issues. Like lately, we've had an issue with matcha. I don't know if anybody's familiar with matcha, but it's in big demand at coffee bars. And my supplier hasn't had any. We've been able to get small samples of it. And so I had to actually send out a memo to my employees to say, please save it for the customers. Do not use it for your shift drink. Because it's not an inexpensive item, and I want to see it move. And I want if customers keep coming and we're out of stock on something, that becomes problematic. So just really looking at the analytics from our point of sale to know what moves, what doesn't move, and where we need to have some of that safety stock.
Great. Thank you, each of you, for those answers. Let's move on to the next topic, and I want to talk about sustainable supply chains and environmental concerns. So, talking about sustainability, many companies are now rethinking their practices due to increasing environmental concerns. And I'd like to know your thoughts on how sustainable practices can help build long-term resilience. And Lisa, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Well, it goes back to my issue when we had COVID and we couldn't get cups. So we've done a lot with the refill process and providing an incentive for our customers to have a cup. We sell our own logoed travel mugs. We encourage them to buy those and give those discounts to refill those. It helps use less of paper and plastic, which is, sometimes hard to come by. And the other thing that we look at just in our product offerings is we try to do as much with local products as we possibly can, because if we have local suppliers, that really helps reduce issues in sort of distribution and freight forwarding kinds of things that you might have when there is a strike, or when people companies go out of business or whatnot. So just those kinds of things have really helped us.
Lisa, I'm curious, after your cup shortage was over, did you keep the discount for your customers if they brought in their own cups and mugs and containers?
Yes, we do. We're even looking at adding some like a club kind of reward type of thing, just to encourage that usage. And we're a sit down coffee bar. We don't have a drive-through, so we're not fast food like a lot of the more popular coffee bars out there, without naming any of them. So we encourage people to use. We have ceramic mugs, ceramic plates, things that can be washed and reused, and it's not disposable. So we encourage that if people are going to be sitting and staying, which most people are when they come into our coffee bar. So that also helps reduce not only my costs, but it helps reduce that usage of paper and plastic.
Great. Vicki, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
My initial thoughts go to packaging. And I noticed that both Walmart and Amazon are now packaging much better because they have machines that make the right size package for the product. Now, that's not to say that I didn't get a new disposal last week that needed a lot of packing in it, and it almost busted the bottom of the box out. They didn't do a great job with that one. And it probably could have shipped in the manufacturer's box, which is something that I read this week that they're going to start doing more of. So I would have been happy to have had a label stuck on that box. But there are a lot of more sustainable products out there now. I'm thinking about one in particular that is made from mushrooms. And to me, that's just it's really interesting. It biodegrades in, like 48 hours or something if you put it outside. I think things like that. Of course, we've got airbags, that we see a lot of, but there are also airbags now that are biodegradable. So instead of using plastic, I think, the brown craft paper and that type of stuff, rather than, the packaging peanuts that get all over the house when you open your box. I think we're just seeing a lot more of that and a lot more interest in doing that. Is it more expensive? Yeah, it is. It's not as cheap as packaging peanuts. I think the plastic airbags are not so expensive. The ones that are biodegradable are more expensive. So there's always a trade-off. But if as a corporation you tout yourself as, being environmentally focused, and then you need to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So I think we'll see more and more of that, and maybe we'll see some of the pricing come down to make it more accessible to, smaller companies as well. I'm seeing a lot more small paper envelopes coming in from Amazon in particular. I think, I think that's going to be the trend. I think we'll see more and more of that.
Vicki, last week I got a package from Amazon, and it was in a small paper bag, and it was printed on the bag. It said, "This bag is smaller than our smallest box." And so they are very conscious of that, to the point that they're printing it on the materials so that the consumer knows.
Well, the other part of that is if you
this.
open it correctly, you can reuse it. I've got 3 or 4 at home just waiting on the next thing that has to go out. So not that I'm cheap or anything, but yeah, I'll reuse their packaging.
Great. Nate, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Vicki, I love the walk comment that you made, right? There are so many customers now that make buying decisions based on sustainability, and walking the walk also translates to customer loyalty, and it translates to sales, and it translates to resonating with newer customer segments. And so there are real issues and real forces that are driving adoption of more sustainable packaging and products, and really a whole end-to-end rethinking of many products. There are 2 things, the end-to-end, right? A product, you really think about what is the system of systems that it takes to produce and to get a product, not to the end consumer, but to its end of life, which is the disposal, which is after its useful life. And there's a lot more thought being put into that. And there's regulations that are forcing some of that thought, right? The European Union has the extended producer responsibilities. And so by law, you actually have to take certain actions and use certain materials in order to sell into the European Union so that it meets their disposal requirements. And so there's some big forces that are at play, but there's actually also some upside opportunity that companies are creating. When you think circular economy, there are second lives for products that are valuable that aren't necessarily the life that the original manufacturer intended it to be. And so when you start thinking about these ways to repurpose a material, you actually start introducing new revenue streams, and that kind of sustainability can actually be profitable for a company when they take that approach.
Nate, do you have any examples of the second life for a product off the top of your head?
You see it a lot in apparel and manufacturing. I mean, the Real or Rebag, these are two companies who are like billion-dollar market cap companies at this point. The Real, I believe, is a publicly traded company now, but their whole entire market is selling used like Louis Vuitton bags and luxury items, where it's kind of made these original manufacturers start to rethink their business model, and like they're losing out on an extra $1 billion in revenue, where they could open up their own secondhand retail type organizations. You also see like repurposing mattresses is a really big one. Like the disposal of a mattress is super expensive, but there's a lot of raw material that's within that mattress that can be like repurposed into like broken down and then made into like rugs and carpets and things like that. And so those are kind of two examples.
Nike is letting people, not Nike, Levi's is letting people trade in their jeans, and then they take that fabric and shred it, and it's used. I know Ford Motor Company was using it for a while in their car seats. So that's another example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We let people take our coffee grinds for their gardens.
Great.
I know that's a little different, but.
No, it's great. Awesome. Well, I want to move on to our next topic. Our next topic is future-proofing supply chains for long-term success. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how we can safeguard our supply chains for long-term success. Today, we've had two insightful sessions on the future of logistics and the potential benefits and obstacles AI might bring to businesses. So how can businesses look at supply chain as a strategic asset? Vicki, let's start with you on this one.
One of the things that I found as I was researching for the courseware was that companies are beginning to use excess capacity and sell it for supply chain as a service. I think that's fascinating. And since then, we've seen Amazon offer up warehouse space and essentially third-party activities for shipping and handling orders on that type of a basis. And I think we'll see more of that. I'm a little, I can't remember who else is in it, and I wasn't prepared to go first this time, but that's okay. I think that's one good example of it, because if you've got capacity to share, then you may help somebody else, another company, be successful that really needs that expertise that you can offer. Otherwise, I think planning plays a huge part, and I think you got to plan to avoid disruption as much as you can. And so one of the things that had really impressed me was a study that Gartner did in 21, I think. They surveyed a bunch of supply chain managers, and they came out with, how do companies manage all those disruptions? So, we were looking at the trade wars, and then COVID, and then all these hurricanes that were so bad, and then there were all these protests in the U.S. and beyond, and then this freeze down in Texas that lasted forever, it seemed like, and you couldn't get over one before you were getting hit with another one. And so there wasn't a chance to, recoup and take a deep breath and think through, what does my next move really need to be? And so one of the things the Gartner study found is that companies were either disruption shapers or they were disruption responders. And so the responders were the ones that were just trying to get a deep breath, and it didn't make any difference about what the product was or how big the company was. That didn't matter, but it was consistently these two classes of of companies. And so the difference is the surface area of your supply chain. And so if you've got a bunch of warehouses, a bunch of manufacturers, a lot of different legs of the journey as it's going from manufacturing to the end user, the more stops you have on that supply chain process, the more chance there is that somewhere along the line you're going to experience a disruption, and probably a serious one. Companies who had a reduced surface area, that had long distances between just a few touch points, those companies were in a lot better shape. And they actually experienced about a third, less than a third of what the other companies did. So the disruption responders had averaged 9.5 disruptions during this period of time. And the disruption shapers only experienced 2.5. So it made a huge difference in just the number of touch points in the supply chain. So to me, it would be really smart to, really optimize that supply chain to have as few touch points as possible.
Great. Thanks, Vicki. Nate, what are your thoughts on businesses looking at a supply chain as a strategic asset?
Yeah, I always, in my mind, I always come back to competitive advantage. I like to use a case study from Dell that is super interesting to me. And so the supply chain acts as an enabler for what the corporation is trying to do. So Dell was established in 1984. So 2 decades after IBM had brought the first computers to market. And by 2001, Dell was the leading producer of computers. And if you look today at IBM, they don't produce computers at all. And so Dell had this the revolutionary way to serve the customer. They decided that they were going to customize their computers and allow for a unique manufacturing process to support that. And so instead of using an assembly process and just like optimizing for cost, they created an ability to quickly customize large orders to deliver to corporations in a manner that was more impactful for each of the departments within the corporation. And so in order to do that, they needed a very specifically designed supply chain. They had their main suppliers. They forced them to co-locate supply hubs right next to their manufacturing facility so that they had great resiliency, minimized disruption, and very close coordination and control between when orders were coming in and what supplies were needed, so that they could facilitate this very rapid cellular manufacturing rather than an assembly line. And so, the rest is history. They were able to create a process to meet price, deliver customized service, and the consumers ate that up. IBM no longer produces custom computers, Dell does. And so it was their supply chain that enabled that strategy as part of the unique way that Dell went to market.
Thank you, Nate. Lisa, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I know this can be a little bit controversial, but I think for us, and particularly for me, I like to try and find, and I know it adds a lot to the cost that I have to pass on to my consumer, but as much as we can to do American made, so that we have the capability within we're not looking at ships coming through the Panama Canal. Everything's here. We can sustain our own supply needs as much as possible. Now, with that being said, my biggest inventory item and what I go through the most every week is coffee. And the only region in the US that produces coffee is Hawaii. So we've still got, ships coming in. We've got our airplanes or however we get those coffee beans in. But the US obviously is not a big coffee growing region. But I think like for the cups, any kind of supplies that I have that I need, if I can get them American made, and yes, the cost is a little bit higher, but it doesn't have as long on the lead times. There's not as much disruption, let's say.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, all of you. Moving on to the next topic, I want to talk a little bit about strategies to navigate a climate of persistent unpredictability. So, as we know, the supply chain industry has faced a lot of turmoil over the past several years. And I'd like to explore how companies are adjusting their supply chain strategies to cope with persistent unpredictability. So Nate, with your impressive 20 years of military service and expertise as an operational efficiency consultant, I'd like to ask you first for your insights on the opportunities and challenges that upcoming professionals should consider in order to build resilience in their future supply chain roles.
Yeah, great. This is such an important topic, and I think it's been echoed a few times by the other presenters today as well. I'm a huge proponent of innovation and investing in new technologies. I mentioned some earlier, but creating transparency and then finding and uncovering these sources of leading indicators so that you can see something coming before it happens. I love, Vicki, the framework of disruption shaper and disruption responder. Right, you want to put yourself in a position to shape what that disruption looks like. It's going to happen, and so those are the technologies that you should look for, and those are the systems that you should put in place to make sure that you can get into that category. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there in technologies that are coming to market. I think the challenge is, not very creative here, but there is always a persistent tug and pull between cost, efficiency, and resiliency, and reliability. And so a challenge that I think we don't talk a lot about in supply chain, that supply chain leaders, everyone has to be a good communicator, and you have to be a good storyteller. And so there's a big challenge in any organization to be able to tell the story on, hey, I know it's going to cost a little bit more, but we should be sourcing all of these things domestically. At least as you mentioned, it really helps your business to source everything from the U.S. And if a supply chain manager feels passionately about that, you have to be able to build your case and convince everyone else that, hey, we're going to lose a couple of points on margin, but this is overall going to increase resiliency and improve the business long term. And so I don't think we talk enough about storytelling and communication to overcome some of those challenges.
Great, thank you. Now, Lisa, I know that you own the coffee shops, and a lot of your answers and your responses today have been tailored to this unpredictability and how you've adapted to it. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to this?
One of the things that I've had to do is just really, even in marketing strategies, I always have not just a plan A and a plan B, but a plan A through kind of Z almost to be able to pivot where I need to. And I do that with my supplies as well. So if for some reason there's something that's out or I'm not able to get something, I always have multiple backup plans. I've got multiple suppliers. So if there are issues, one of the interesting things when I first opened the coffee bar, I just thought, it'd be so easy if I just had really one or two suppliers so that when I have to reorder inventory, it's super easy. And now I think I've probably got 20 or 30 because I have all these backups to try and figure out if something goes wrong with one. So you do need to have multiple sources and several different plans for what could happen or go wrong. And then again, back to that safety stock on the critical things that your data is showing you, you're gonna need more of those items.
Thanks, Lisa. Now, Vicki, you have worked through a big strike in the 90s, and multiple disruptions throughout your career. What takeaways can students learn from what could have been one of the most costly strikes in U.S. history?
You've got to be talking about the UPS strike or the potential of one. I was at work. I'm a bit of a late bloomer. So when I say I was early in my career, I was in the earlier days of, once I discovered, at that point, supply chain wasn't even heard. It was logistics. I was very young in that career. Had just finished my bachelor's degree, and I was working for a heavy equipment parts distribution center near Memphis, Tennessee. And my boss was on vacation. I had already that week begun to move some freight over, small shipments over to other providers. A lot of it went to FedEx, because when you can ship until after midnight and get it there the next day, that's what you do. So I'd already started shifting some of that. My role at that point was an analyst, but I was second in command in that office. And I began to go out to our customers and say, hey, we're watching this situation. Help us watch it too. If you hear anything we don't, let us know. And so I kept moving and moving. And then when it hit, the day it hit, then I already had FedEx already set up. We were pretty high volume. We filled up at least one trailer of each every day. So I'd already made arrangements to have an extra trailer brought in and to make those things. And the funny thing is that I had a job interview with another company that day that the strike actually hit, and I was late. And I went in with my uniform shirt on and my hair in a ponytail and my sleeves rolled up and sweat on my brow. And I got the job pretty much on the spot, because that hiring manager he was impressed with how I was able to pivot and to make things work. And so I think staying flexible, I've always laughed about supply chain. I said, if you don't like what you're doing now, wait 5 minutes, because then you'll be doing something different. Maybe you'll like that better. And if you don't like that, wait 5 more. So that's kind of been the story of my career through 30 plus years and sometimes you tend to fly by the seat of your pants, but then once the data began to be available, I didn't have to fly by the seat of my pants anymore. I had good instincts, but I could study the data and see what it was telling me, and I could read what was coming up, what's in the future, and I stayed in close touch with my providers and my sales reps, and so I was listening to them to see what was happening. But with the UPS strike, the drivers and the UPS personnel were instructed, don't tell anybody we're going to strike, because they'll start pulling volume away. Well, that's exactly what I did, however many years ago that was. And so they would just say, we're not going to strike. And then they would go and report in the volumes that they thought were at risk. Okay, and then you got FedEx on the other hand saying, look, if you want us to pick up your slack, you better be giving us some shipments now and getting in now, because it's going to be too late once they go on strike. So you've got these tugs and all these things going on in the industry. There's going to be, people are going to be paying more. There's going to be some rate increases. And part of that, I fear, is going to be for those big pay raises that the UPS drivers, full-time and part-time, are going to be getting. So shippers should be aware that, they're going to be passing that along. They say they're not, but they will. They will. Did I answer the question?
Thanks. You did. Thank you, Vicki. I love hearing your stories. Okay, to finish up, you guys have done an excellent job. I really appreciate you doing this. And I'm going to throw a question at you that wasn't on our list before, but it's not a hard one, I promise. I'd like each of you just to take a minute or so. And what would you tell to a student who is studying supply chain or considering studying supply chain? What would you tell them about the industry, the field, the study? Just Nate, let's start with you.
I would tell them that it is a very dynamic thing to get involved with, but that it is also very cross-functional. And so as a person involved in the supply chain, you really get to touch a lot of the organization, things like marketing campaigns, impact demand, and different suppliers and sources impact what the margin's going to be and what the price is going to be. And so, I would encourage someone who is very curious about a lot of facets of the business to be able to get into supply chain management and have a good exposure to all of it.
NPR
Vicki, how about
says
you?
that supply chain is where all the cool kids are now. And I would agree with that. They used to call us nerds and geeks, but now we're important because we understand what's going on and how to fix it, how to move, how to get stuff from point A to point B when times are hard. I tell my students, actually, I start out by asking them questions. What is it that you enjoy? What do you like to do? What do you think your strengths are? Oh, well, you know what? In sourcing, those strengths will be ideal. Or as a warehouse manager, or as a production manager, or however they lay out, because supply chain is one of the few places I've seen that's got something for everybody. It just about doesn't matter what your talent is. I mean, you can sing opera and drive a forklift. It doesn't matter. There's always something there that you can share and that you can do, unless they absolutely, hate business. But, all of my students are business students, so I don't get the ones that don't.
Thank you, Vicki. How about you, Lisa?
I think one of the important things for students that are going into that is just to be able to understand, to be able to see kind of the big picture as well as drill down into, the more focused areas, but also that they can handle somewhat of a high stress situation. I've had people absolutely just fall apart in stressful situations. And so that might not be for them, supply chain. I think there can be, if everything's going as planned, it's probably not a lot of high stress, but rarely does everything, go as planned. And so you've got to be prepared for that and be able to, handle that and be able to have sort of multiple strategies to think outside the box in some situations.
Great. Lisa, Vicki, Nate, thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion. Thank you for your preparation for this. This has been amazing and so insightful. We really appreciate your help with this. I have just a couple of items to cover as we wrap up. First of all, we have another supply chain event lined up for December. It's actually with Nate Stemple. He'll be sharing insights on the supply of supply chain innovation. So that will be on December 8th. So we're going to pop a link up right now. If you'd like to register for that, go ahead and register for that. We have also, they told me that they have extended our social media contest through I don't know how long it's been extended, but it's been extended. So go ahead and use the hashtag StukentDS23, and we'll announce that winner later on social media. Once this event ends, everyone will be redirected to a page that's filled with resources related to each of our session topics, as well as information for our next upcoming event. So feel free to browse this page and to implement any of the resources in your next course. Thank you to all of our speakers for making this Stukent Digital Summit a success. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to each one of you for joining us today. We appreciate your continued support. Have a wonderful day, and remember to stay current with Stukent. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.